concerted efforts and those opportunities that we didn't take advantage of. It's a word that has pretensions of being honorable and noble, but it's also a way to explain that we were about to accomplish or do something, but in the end we didn't accomplish it or we didn't do it. For example, the sale that I was almost able to close if the client didn't doubt. Did you sell something today, old man? Well, I almost did. So he didn't bring home any money and he didn't sell it either, but almost. Or the ministry that I almost had if my family had just supported me. The girl that I almost married, or the man that I almost married, had I found the courage to share my emotions. The championship that we almost won. If the referee and FIFA hadn't conspired to steal that game from us that was bought from the beginning. You blame me for Argentina being a champion? Really? Well, you can't celebrate because it was a scam. Well, I'm sorry for being Argentinian. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to say that it was a scam or that it wasn't, but many times Argentina also almost won the World Cup. They almost beat Germany, but we didn't. And all of us at one point or another have used this word, coining it in a phrase of self-justification, right? Oh, did I tell you about that time where I was almost chosen as a manager? Yeah, one time. Almost. They fired me right after, but almost. Did I ever tell you about that one time I almost played in the big leagues? In Argentina, almost everyone was almost a soccer player. The taxi driver, the carpenter, they say, hey, did I tell you that I almost played with Maradona? I couldn't because I got hurt in college, but I was almost a professional. So it's a story that can't be proven through Wikipedia. You can't prove it, but they all say almost. Or, did you know that I almost left the country to look for a better future for my family? Well, did you go? No. But almost. I almost got taken by a smuggler. Or, did I ever tell you about that time I almost won the lottery? I was missing one number. I was almost a millionaire. Since there have been people, there have always been almosts. People that almost won the battle, people that almost climbed the mountain, people that almost found the treasure, but they didn't win, or did they climb, or did they find it? The truth is, and though it sounds painful, the truth is that nobody remembers after some time those that almost won a medal, those that almost won a cup, those that almost won the Oscar or a Nobel Prize or a Pulitzer or the crown for Miss Universe. Nominees only have value until the day the trophy is given. Nominees are mentioned once and again until the day the award is given. Later on, nobody will care who was on the list of the nominees. That's how tough it is, how cruel, how ironic it is. But after we know who the winner is, nobody remembers who was on the list as a probable winner, because not all those that apply are able to qualify for credit. Everyone can apply, but there are those that qualify and there are those that don't. And the Bible narrates dozens of examples of these sad examples. One of those is the famous and without equal King David. And he almost arrived. He's a man that accomplished so much as a young man. But as an older man, he came across an almost. The hands that once used the sling and defeated the giant now cannot stop shaking and trembling. The feet that danced around the ark now drag. His hair is gray and white. His eyes can barely see. And David is about to give what is believed to be his last speech before he goes to eternity. And his intimate circle, his closest circle, is gathered around him. There are courtiers, advisors, secretaries, treasurers, caretakers, medics, nurses. And so he says those words that are detailed in the first book of Chronicles, chapter 28, verse 2. He says, David says, it was my desire to build a temple where the ark of the Lord's covenant could rest permanently. as God's footstool. I made all the necessary preparations to build it. It's a strange way to say his goodbye, right? David mentions not what he did accomplish, because he did accomplish a lot, but all that he wanted to, but he couldn't in his old age. God didn't allow him to do it. David wanted to build a temple, a home for the Ark of the Covenant, and that temple would have been his final masterpiece, his legacy. He was prepared for an entire lifetime to build that temple. He said, when I no longer have to fight any battles, when I'm an older man with experience, I'm going to build the temple. David wanted to dedicate his last years to building a sanctuary for God. All the preparations were set, architects had been chosen, builders had been hired, preliminary projects, plans, drawings, blueprints, numbers. The columns in the temple had been designed, all the decoration had been picked out. Good intentions, a lot of preparation, but there was no temple. Why? If all the resources were at hand. Well, 1 Chronicles 22:3 also tells us that David provided large amounts of iron for the nails that would be needed for the doors and the gates, and he gave more bronze than could be weighed. He also provided innumerable cedar logs. We're talking about tons and tons of material to build a mega temple. And so what happened? The resources were there. Well, David himself, each time he writes, and anytime he shares something, it's like poetry. He doesn't try and fake things. He's not a hypocrite. He doesn't hide the real reasons to his almost. He says, I was unable to build a temple because God told me, you will not build a temple in my name because you are a man of war, and you have spilled a lot of blood, but your son, Solomon, he will be the one to build my home. It seems like David's bloodthirsty temperament and his indomitable character cost him the privilege of being able to build a temple. David went from being a forgotten son to a shepherd, to then sleeping in a cave, to then sleeping in a palace, but in his old age, he got to know he almost built a temple. It's just that God didn't allow him to, and this would be the final frustration in King David's life. Everything that he prepared for in a lifetime, in the end, he almost accomplished it, but he didn't. The history books and the chronicles tell us that David did not build the temple. The word almost is very similar to when we say, I was so close, and it's often used to show the frustration of not having reached something, or also to explain the satisfaction that something bad didn't happen. Oh, I was so close to having an accident, right? Well, it's a great thing that you didn't have an accident. I was so close to getting caught by immigration. Well, great thing they didn't. My mother-in-law was so close to living with us. Hallelujah, she didn't. Those so close are very valued, right? There's another example, before I go deep into what God wants to tell us. Another example of an almost, or so close. This isn't David. This is another king named Agrippa. So Herod Agrippa was a diplomat that, through his friendship with the family of the Roman Empire, his grandfather, Herod the Great, Herod the First, Herod Agrippa was an expert in politics, in Jewish law. He was a sort of diplomat, and the Apostle Paul, according to Scripture, says that the Apostle Paul was taken before him, Herod Agrippa. So to make a long story short, Paul shares his testimony with Agrippa. He doesn't cover it up. He doesn't beat around the bush, much like in Paul's style. And after the conversation, after Paul's speech, Agrippa mentions that historic phrase that we find in Acts 26:28. Paul, you almost persuaded me to become a Christian. So close. So Agrippa was impressed. He was moved, I have no doubt, maybe even confronted. But he didn't become a Christian by a little bit. In other words, someone else that almost had an encounter with Christ. Almost. You know when somebody says, when they ask you, hey, are you Christian? No, I'm not a brother or sister of the church. I'm a cousin. Almost. Almost is an incomplete quantity. In heavenly mathematics, it's not enough. It's not enough to be close to the cross and far from Christ, or to say, I almost know Christ. In fact, I think hell is full of people that were almost saved, or were close to being saved. Many people might say, really, I've come here to burn? Yeah, you were close to going up, but you were closer to coming down here. Another famous almost in the Bible, the most emblematic example is Pontius Pilate. Pilate is a short patrician with very expensive clothing, like any conceited short person. I'm sorry to anyone that's short. I'm talking about in the Bible, not my contemporaries. He has a short haircut. I can imagine him with a clean shave, prolific. That's how the Roman magistrates used to look. He's led by two soldiers that come down a long staircase made with a mosaic of rocks. The magistrate sits in his seat, and the accused of the day comes in. The assumed criminal has swollen feet, covered in mud, tanned hands, protruding knuckles. You can tell that he was a carpenter for at least 3 decades. More than a laborer, Pilate thinks. More than just a seditious dissident. This is a laborer. He seems like a common man. He has a black eye. It's closing because it's swollen due to all the torture he's been through. His other eye looks down at the ground. His lower lip is busted open, bleeding. His hair covered in blood, sticking to his forehead. It's obvious that before bringing this accused man, they provided him with a great beating. Experience has taught Pilate to keep himself far from Jewish quarrels, especially those that have to do with religion. He doesn't get involved in that. But he must admit that he has some curiosity as to why this Jesus has agitated the people so much. If it were due to the nature of the charges brought against him, then Pilate would release the man immediately, because there is no proof against him except the fact that the people that brought him hate him. But the people are demanding blood and demanding a verdict. And so the small man, which represents the power of the Roman Empire, says, "Hey, are you the king of the Jews?" But Jesus doesn't lift his head. But maybe he lifts his eyes, or at least one of them. He can't open the other. Pilate thinks, how many wide-eyed eyes have looked at him in that way, begging for resolution or mercy? But this carpenter doesn't answer. He doesn't defend himself. He says quietly, "You said it. Let me ask you again, are you the king of the Jews?" And he says it again. You've said it. And before Pilate can react, the group of Jewish leaders that brought this man to him begin to shout out against the accused. "This man self-proclaims himself as king. He must die." And meanwhile, the humble Galilean continues looking down at the floor. Pilate looks at the Jewish leaders huddled in the opposite corner of the court. For the religious leaders, whiplashes aren't enough. Pilate wants to let Jesus go. In a way, he's asking him, or telling him, "Give me one reason to let you go. Give me one reason and I'll set you free. These crazy men hate you. I don't know why, but I can't find a reason to condemn you. So give me a single reason and I'll let you go." So he tries to negotiate with the people. He tries to give them Barabbas, a delinquent, but they prefer to kill Jesus. He thinks that if he sends Jesus to the whipping post, if they give him 39 whips, then it'll be enough. But no, they want Jesus to go to Golgotha. Pilate says he can't find a crime in this man, but they accuse him of violating the law, of opposing Caesar. So Pilate almost carries out what would have been the greatest act of mercy in all of this world's history. Almost. He almost set the Son of God free. Of course, theologically speaking, somebody can say, well, that would have stopped God's divine plan. All right. Well, let's focus on Pilate. He almost set him free. He had the power. He had the decision in his hands. He used the ring with which orders were sealed with. The ring meant that Caesar endorsed him. And Luke 23:22 says, for the third time he spoke to them. Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him. But in this story, you can begin to visualize the reasons as to why sometimes sad almosts come about. Like in the case of David or Agrippa, or in this case, in Pilate's case. The word says that the religious leaders shouted out, demanding that Jesus be crucified. And their shouts, according to the word, their shouts prevailed. They covered all reasoning. They prevailed above all the other voices. There were many voices that Pilate could have listened to. He could have listened to the voice of Jesus. He had him in front of him 3 times. But Jesus didn't defend himself. He barely answered the questions he was asked. But his silence was much higher than the demands of the crowds. But Pilate did not listen. Any judge or magistrate that has been in this situation beforehand say they can read the accused. Immediately, no matter how much they pretend or how hypocritical they are, they can identify if they're guilty or not. And Pilate identifies that he's innocent. Pilate could have listened to the voice of his wife. At one moment, he feels a tap on his shoulder. Nobody can touch his shoulder except his wife. Because if he doesn't pay attention, then he'll have problems at home. And his wife gives him a note. My beloved Pilate, don't have anything to do with this righteous, innocent man, because I've had many dreams with him, and now that I see him personally, he is the man that I've seen in my dreams. He's innocent. Don't get involved. Let the Jews resolve their own issues. Anyone would have stopped and asked about the origin of that dream, and why his wife, who is a Roman, calls him an innocent, righteous man. Romans don't call any Jews righteous. I would have asked for a moment and said, hey, old woman, what are you talking about? Look, Ponzi, I had nightmares. But no, he didn't listen to her. He didn't pay attention. He could have listened to his own voice. He says, I have found no grounds for the death penalty. There is no reason to crucify him. That's the maximum penalty. That's what we do with delinquents, with criminals. So that it can be a public exposition, a lesson to the rest of the people. Not just a man that said a few things that you didn't like. He could have listened to many voices. Pilate, I mean. But he didn't. So many voices. The voice of religion, the voice of convenience, the voice of politics, the voice of conscience. So Pilate also asks himself that very famous question, what will I do with Jesus, the one called Christ? The question continues resounding throughout the centuries. There are many people that ask themselves, what will I do with Jesus? What will I do with this Christ? Do I let him into my life, or do I continue the way I am? He asked himself, what will I do with this man? He expressed it verbally. He didn't know what decision to take. The almost set him free, but he didn't do it. Pilate supposed that he could have avoided making a decision. He said, I can avoid it. I can remain neutral. I can stay in the gray area. And by not choosing, he chose. By not selecting, he selected. And that's the great syndrome of those that say, I just watch from afar. I don't want to be too close. I don't want to be too far. And they think that in that way they're being neutral. No, when you don't choose, you're choosing. Neutrality doesn't exist in God's things. And Pilate, instead of asking for God's grace, he asked for a basin. The act of washing his hands wasn't a part of the legal process. That wasn't customary. Until then, nobody had ever done it. But this was Pilate's way of communicating to the crowds his separation from the matter. When he washed his hands, the sentence was implicit. It was a sort of, do with him as you please, as you see fit. I'm not condemning him personally, but washing his hands means, but I'm also not impeding it. I'm not stopping it. And this act remains in the culture as a symbol of those that by personal convenience fold before the demands of the crowd and sentences an innocent man. It hurts us when a politician washes his hands. The worst thing they can tell us is, what did the judge do? Oh, he washed his hands. He washed his hands before the rapist. What did the president do? Oh, he washed his hands when somebody identified corruption in his cabinet. What did the pastor do? He washed his hands when somebody publicly confessed that they were doing things with a double morale. Washing your hands symbolizes a superficial act of purity. But that doesn't allow him to elude the final act of judgment. He sent Jesus away. Instead of listening to Christ's voice, he listened to the people's voices, and Pilate learned that there is no darker hell than the hell of remorse. Washing his hands 1,000 times will never set him free from the opportunity that he let pass. He'll never be able to forgive himself for something that he could have done, but he didn't. The story doesn't end with him washing his hands. Washing his hands set him as the magistrate that almost set Jesus free. And then there are legends going around that say that Pilate's wife gave her life to Christ. She surrendered her heart to the Lord. And legend also tells us that Pilate lived the rest of his life near a lake, and he would frantically wash his hands several times a day trying to avoid the guilt, but he was never able to rid himself of it. The truth is that that's just folklore. We don't know if this actually happened, but what we do know is that remorse never left Pilate, and that's what happens with almosts. David, Agrippa, Pilate, these are only three cases, three of the most emblematic cases. But each one of us today, we've also lived or are about to live through an almost. We all have our moments of being close. I've been on many deathbeds or accompanying those that are in their final station of life, and I've heard many regrets of things that they almost did, but they didn't ultimately do them. I always say there are many people that regret what they did. They can say a prayer of repentance, but there's more remorse over things that people didn't say or do. The declarations of love that they hid, the moments that they didn't spend with their family, with their children, with their spouse. That remorse is atrocious because they see their life vanishing. That syndrome is something that we share, all human beings. Sometimes I watch on TV those men that have perfect abs. They're strong, athletic, healthy. They have like 3-4 abs here. You can shred cheese on them. And when I see that, I say the same thing. I have to do exercise every day, at least 1 hour. It's not that hard. In fact, they say that at my age, you should drink certain things that contain many minerals that I'm lacking. If somebody is my age, start with these minerals. I say, yeah, it's true. I have to drink calcium, magnesium, probiotics, sodium, cobalt, sulfur, phosphorus, and 35 other organic elements. All that. As a young man, all I drank was Coca-Cola. But now I have to have all that. And I have great intentions, a great disposition to do so. But it's just that I almost do exercise daily. And I almost drink these minerals. And I know that I'm not alone in this, so don't laugh at me, ironically. I know there are people here that bought tools to fix the door, fix the roof. You said, all right, I'm tired of it. I'm going to Home Depot to buy the tools, but you never ended up repairing that thing that had to be fixed. Oh, did you fix the roof? No. Almost. But I have the tools already. Others bought a treadmill, and now they hang towels and jackets on it. But you almost began that healthy lifestyle. Now, I know certain things are optional, and they depend on each person, such as getting healthy or fixing a door, but there are other things that are essential, like the race of life. The writer of the Hebrews said, let us run the race ahead of us without stopping. Never stop. There is no, take a break on the sidewalk, rest for a little. No, it's continue your race, which implies that the Christian race is not just a light jog. It's a demanding race that exhausts you, sometimes agonizing, but you have to continue. And it requires a great effort to finish it with strength and not as an almost. People won't remember how we began, but everyone will remember how we ended up, how we finished. I've seen it in boxers, in great actors, in the Hollywood universe. They come out in a movie that's a failure, and people remember them for that. That's how unfair we are. Or a boxer that fights an extra fight as an older man, and he gets knocked out in the first round, and people forget that he retained the belt for 20 years. Because the last thing we do, that almost is what marks us. And I've seen many be left halfway to their goal. And there was a time where they used to keep their stride. They would run, but they never thought, they never calculated that the race would be so exhausting. Maybe they lost strength when they stumbled, because stumbling is a part of running. Whatever the reason was, they no longer run. Maybe they go to church, maybe they come to church, maybe they offer, but their hearts are not in that race of faith. They left before their time. They retired before their time. So they're almost like in a state of coma. They come and congregate, but they don't run the race. Many years ago, God gave me the opportunity of beginning a deep friendship, a very, very deep friendship with a beloved friend, a man of God named Omar Cabrera, the Reverend Omar Cabrera, who is currently in the presence of the Lord. I wasn't a friend of his my whole life, or his life, but in his final years, he felt like dedicating certain lunches with me. He said, let's have lunch twice a week because I want to transmit certain things to you. I want to empty myself in you and teach you what I know. It was an astounding gift. I never missed one of those meetings. And one morning during breakfast, I asked Omar if he could give me one piece of advice, something that I should know and treasure for the rest of my life. What would that advice be? And the man told me, are you sure you want to hear it? Because many have asked me that question, but we're not ready to hear the answer. And I said, yeah, I want to know what that one advice is above them all. And he said, just remain focused, my son. Keep your course for the rest of your life. Don't lose your north. Did you hear me, son? Whatever your north is, don't lose it. And he added, because in this business, when he spoke about business, he spoke about the business of the kingdom, the business of the Father, the way Jesus defined it at the age of 12. He said, in this business, you have to hold on. It's all about remaining. It's not a 100-meter dash. It's a marathon of resistance. And you have to remain. You have to last. You have to keep up. You have to put up with the beatings and be there. And I gave thanks for that. And I've forgotten other things due to the fragility of my mind. But I've stored away that axiom until today. If something was born in the heart of God, it's assumed that it should remain. And it should remain through time until the end. In the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 35, it's narrated that the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders of the time, the Pharisees wanted to condemn the disciples to death. All of Jesus' followers. They wanted to execute them. And so in the middle of the court, a certain Gamaliel, a doctor of the law, a very well-respected man, presented a magnificent speech that, for me, it saved my life. Every time I remember these words, these aren't the most well-known words. They don't appear on bumper stickers, nor do you use them as magnets on a fridge, but man, have these words saved my life more than once. Gamaliel said, "Men of Israel, I insist," he speaks to all the men that want to condemn the disciples. "Consider carefully what you intend to do with these men." And then he gives an explanation. Some time ago, you know that a certain Theudas appeared, claiming to be somebody, the Messiah. Remember this man? And they all said, "Oh, yes, we remember." And about 400 men rallied to him. He said he was the Christ. But they killed him. And as far as I know, he didn't rise. His body's still there. After him, all his followers were dispersed. After him, Judas the Galilean appeared. Remember him? Oh, yes. In the days of the census, and led a band of people in revolt. My mom used to say, for every broken person, there's another broken person. And then Gamaliel said, well, this Judas was also killed. And his followers were scattered. Well, in this case, I advise you, men of Israel, leave these men alone. For if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. But if what they do is from a human origin, it will fail. They'll be left in an almost. But if it is from God, you will not be able to halt it. And don't find yourselves fighting against God. When he said that, all the leaders felt a cold tingle that started at the top of their spine and ended where the noble name of the back ends. And they let the men free. The reasoning is simple. What is human always ends in an almost. David trying to build a temple. Agrippa saying, you almost persuaded me to become a Christian. Or Pilate saying, let me wash my hands. I can almost set him free, but I'm not going to do it. Gamaliel spoke about those that said that they were messiahs, and they were almost messiahs, but they weren't it. They didn't rise, they didn't set anyone free. What is not born in the heart of God tends to dissolve like damp sand between your fingers. And I know that pastors that are watching know this. How many of us have seen people trying to divide churches? Because this happens to all the pastors on the planet. Suddenly somebody looks from below and says, this is easy. I just have to put on a suit, wear some red bottoms, and preach. I tell 3 jokes and that's it. Some believe that it's easy, so they say, well, let me start a church. And they always take people with them. Like I said, after one crazy guy, there's always another crazier guy following. And they say, God sent me to start a new ministry, but it'll be more powerful. There will be more fire, more healing. There won't be any mother-in-laws here. I don't know what they promise. But then they're left frustrated, stagnant, forgotten. I remember somebody that told me, Dante, I'm going to be the only one that leaves River, and I'm going to be so successful. And it was worthless for me to tell them that when they seek success, that success is evasive. Seeking success can never be the motor or the combustible to a true calling. We don't get into the business of souls to be successful. Having good fame with man, the way success or resources are understood, these things are never sought. They always come on their own. Like the harvest of a good planting. It takes 30 years to find success from night to day. But it comes. The Bible says these blessings will reach you. Does somebody believe it, yes or no? It doesn't say you will seek these blessings. No, these blessings will reach you. Men like this young man that said this to me, ignore the principle of Gamaliel. If it is from God, it will prevail. If not, it will be just another almost. There are no instant things in God's kingdom. It's a resistance. When the crowds followed Jesus with selfish purposes, he reminded them of the cost. And in Luke 14:28, he uses a metaphor of construction to tell them. Jesus tells them, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. If you have any common sense, wouldn't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation, if you set the ground, the foundation, and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. How many people have we gotten to know that are half-built towers? That they wanted to, but they didn't calculate the cost. And they said, I'm moving by faith, but what about the cost? Moving by faith isn't improvisation. I can tell you dozens of cases of when I was younger, when I was a boy or a young man, the congregation where we congregated, somebody would leave their job at the factory or they would abandon their job saying, you know what, from now on I'm going to live by faith because God told me. And then they died of hunger, them and their families. They would end up getting a divorce. Their life was chaotic because they made ignorance a virtue. They made improvisation a gift. So, good intentions are never enough to finish something that we've begun. God never blesses intentions. If not, when we get to heaven, instead of God saying, well done, good and faithful servant, he'll say, oh, great intention, my servant. You have great intentions. You never moved a finger, but you always had great intentions. And there are those that begin to build, but they don't finish what they began due to a lack of calculations. Everything in life deserves calculations. If you're going to get married, you're going to have to calculate the cost. If you're going to have children, you have to calculate the cost. If you decide to not have kids, you have to calculate the cost of not having children. If you're going to buy a house, if you're going to open a new credit line, if you're going to leave a country or stay in the country, everything has a cost that has to be calculated. If you go to the urns to vote for a president democratically, it has a cost. How many people have we known that fall in love with a restaurant and say, oh, I would love to be a restaurant owner, but they never took a tour through the kitchen? The restaurant isn't what you see out in the hall with the candles and the portraits. No, the chaos in the kitchen is what you have to deal with. And through the years, I've learned that the important part isn't running fast, but remaining in the race. Then a muleteer told me that you don't have to arrive first, but you have to know how to arrive. We sing it, but we don't live it. You have to know how to get there. Serving the Lord isn't a 100-meter race. It's a marathon of resistance. I get very happy when I see colleagues that continue their race, even after so many years. Life separated us. It took us down different paths, but sometimes I encounter people that say, I've been serving the Lord in this province, in this country, I'm a missionary. Dante, we met when we were younger. I insist, life took us down different paths, but when we re-encounter, and we're both still enlisted, it means that neither of us abandoned our roles. We never gave up. We didn't let our arms down. And in the interim, we all have problems. We all do. Because those that remain aren't the perfect ones, with no problems, those that show themselves to be sinless. No, we all have problems. The one that says he doesn't is just a scammer. But we all fight with weaknesses, with problems. We're all disappointing. The point is to remain despite these disappointments, to stay intact. It's incredible to see durability and longevity in ministry. Here we have many people that serve as ushers that personally I know them. I've known them for the last 16 years. When we arrived at the Crystal Cathedral and I saw them, and they haven't changed their smile. There was a young girl, a young boy that I've known for many, many years. Then there are others that have joined us, and thank God for them. But there's a team of pastors here, of servers, that have remained, and that produces something so beautiful in me, to know that they're faithful. Now in Panama, the pastor from Cuba went to go visit us, the local pastor from Cuba, the one that helped us build the homes. We've seen him on video, of course, and he says, well, let me tell you something. You want me to tell you something, Pastor? That's how Cubans speak. I'm not trying to joke about them, but they have a marvelous tone that hopefully people speak this way in heaven. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How you going? Flavor, Peter would say. It'd be spectacular. And he says, look, I got to know your pastors here, Guillermo, Rudy, Fernando. And you know what's interesting to me and all the Cubans? The love that they have for River, the love they have for you, Pastor. These are loyal people, people that don't whisper, they don't gossip. And my chest came out, just like when Argentina recently won, longevity. How beautiful. Like when they speak well about your child came home and he helped clear the table, and you know that in your home he doesn't help with anything, but it doesn't matter. It brings joy to you that in somebody else's home they honored your name, they represented you well. The inconsistency, the lack of stability and permanence always ruins any plan, and it takes us to the station of almost. There are many people with excessive ease and leisure in changing their opinions, their thoughts, their friends, their church, their pastor, and I'm the type of person that sustains that you have to change. I'm not the same person, let's not even say 10 years, but last year. However, there are convictions that you cannot touch. There are essences that don't change, but there are people that suffer from ADHD spiritually and emotionally. Attention deficit and hyper deficit. They start a job and then they quit soon. Why'd you leave? Well, I didn't like having to have the same schedule every day. There are those that jump from congregation to congregation. They even list out the congregations they've been through. They say it proudly. They say, this is the 42nd church I've been to. They can never set foundations anywhere because when things start to get ugly, they pack up their things and leave. Others are inconsistent intellectually. They never finish reading a book, ever. They have more than 20 books on their nightstand. They're all halfway done. And they wander as if they have dyslexia, but really what they have is inconsistency. Generally, those that are inconsistent intellectually are the same way spiritually. Generally speaking, there are hearts that are distracted, that are unfocused. That's how they are even when they stream. They start a series and they don't finish it. They start a movie, they don't finish it because they get bored. A life without any strategy, without anything predefined. Erratic lifestyles. They have chronic spiritual hiccups. And they go wherever that hiccup takes them. We live in a time of people that are fragile, people that are inconsistent. We can see it. I once told you that I was reading that sociologists say that those that were born between 1990 and 2000, don't say amen just in case, they're considered, in the majority, there are always exceptions to the rule. They're called the glass generation because they're the children of people from Generation X that lacked a lot in their childhoods, but they got out ahead through a lot of suffering and set it as a priority to give their children a better quality of life so that they wouldn't have to go through the same thing that Generation X went through, and that's fine. However, that brings along an issue. They're the most inconsistent children, the most fragile children that humanity has ever seen, because they never went through frustrations. They never encountered real problems. They were born in the digital age. I was born in the analog age and I became digital as an adult. But these people are already digital. And for them, everything is ethereal. They say, I almost got that job. I almost studied that. I almost accomplished it. Not too much empathy. No interest in culture or literature. All their culture comes from their cell phone. Low self-esteem, a low threshold to pain and frustration. They're emotionally unstable. And they have a resounding emotional instability. So there are many people that are prepared for success. But there are others that stumble over the smallest thing. And this happens in the Christian atmosphere as well. Martyrs were tortured. I'm not talking about the biblical martyrs. I'm talking about the modern ones. Behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union or Red Russia, they had to pray in catacombs. And when they would find you, they would kill you. It's not that they would just give you a ticket. However, these days, anything is enough to say, I'm going to leave the church. They didn't love me. And sociologists confirm that we're headed towards a world made of glass, a humanity that wants everything, but that demands everything as well. There are certain people that you can't raise your voice at because immediately they feel attacked and they want to sue you due to emotional abuse. Please, you're abusing me. You're abusing me. Really? And the Lord is a God of longevity, of permanence, of resistance. Statistics say that 70% of leaders, including many pastors, abandon their ministry before their 4th year, and that 20% don't even reach the 7th year of their ministry. The majority give up before seeing an impact in their ministry. And the percentages of these statistics are alarming, because if something is born in God, it remains. It'll make it to the end, yes or no? Throughout all these years, I've had to go through very sad seasons, very difficult moments, disappointments, betrayals in ministry, pain, injustice, false testimony, gossip, defamation, criticism. All that added to social media that 20 years back weren't around. A famous author that no longer exists, named Umberto Eco, said, back in the day, drunk men that were silenced in the bar, they were told, you know what, just go home. But now, they give their opinion online over a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. So when you're exposed, you receive evil adjectives, defamation, slander. I lived many gray days where I felt in pain, asking myself, how will I defend myself? What can I say? But I've always accomplished finding comfort in those semi-hidden words in the book of Acts said by Gamaliel. If this comes from God, it will remain. It will last. Somebody needs to celebrate over that. This will last. Now, those gray days, they never stopped me from continuing my walk. One day I know I'll see my life, and I'll know that I invested my time in serving the Lord. And the good thing about all this is that nobody stopped me with mistakes. Only history will judge me. History will judge you. Time is our ally. Sooner or later, you'll say, yeah, I learned, I didn't learn, I was blessed by it, I wasn't blessed by it, but the point is to make it. Now, what would have happened if in those gray days I would have given up? If I would have allowed the pain to obstruct my perspective, my long-term perspective, what if I would have said, no, I'm worthless? The amount of times that colleagues of mine in Argentina said, oh, you're just a trend, you're a clown. This guy has everything except other than anointing or a solid word. Nobody will ever listen to him. If I had listened to those words like Pilate, then I would almost be a preacher. I almost would have been a man of God. Somebody that tried it out, got halfway there, but then the criticism was too great and then I couldn't. I had many economic challenges that I wasn't able to face. And if I had reached the conclusion that I was worthless, what if I had listened to those voices that were all around me? I would have allowed one bad moment. I would have allowed one stumble to take from me what I received for the next decades. Today, I would be a part of the great lines, the crowds of the almosts. And God tells us daily, my gifts are irrevocable. It's not that when you mess up, God takes away your gift. Or when you fail, God takes away your calling. No, he didn't take it from Moses. He didn't take it from Jonah. He put him in a fish's belly, but he kept that promise. You either go by boat or by fish, but you're going. Moses had to go through many situations. Let's not even talk about Joshua. God never takes away his calling. And this goes for somebody that's listening to me, that's watching. God has not lost his interest in you. Never, never, never. God will use you. Does somebody believe it, yes or no? God doesn't let his arms down. God does not give up. God doesn't surrender. There's a call from that burning bush. Those gifts, those all remain no matter what you do, whether you set yourself apart or not. The word says, nobody takes from my hand what is mine. No one. And I agree. I don't believe that anyone or anything can take what is in God's hands. You have no idea how the Lord loves you. That's why I like those that understand that we have a call. And it's a long-term call. And it hurts me when I see talented people that prematurely give up. Or that the institution itself forces them to resign. They say, no, if you made this mistake, give up your ministry until you can serve God with holy hands. Who can demand holiness from somebody else when they can't even offer it themselves? And this isn't an apology to liberalism. What I'm trying to say is, how many people were left on the side of the road because they got a divorce, or I don't know, because they made a mistake, or because they raised their voice, they fought, they had a moment of anger, whatever it is. They immediately believe that they lost their calling, they lost their gifts, but they also believe that they lose their salvation. But salvation is there. Just a prayer away, a prayer of repentance. Lord, here I am, forgive me. Christ's blood didn't just forgive you for the sins you committed before you met him, but also for the sins he knew you would commit. The ones you're going to do in the future. That's how the Lord loves you. His grace covers it all. Are you with me? And sometimes, many abandon their ministry. And the congregants have to pick up all the broken pieces of an aborted vision. Why? Why is that? The vision has to remain. It doesn't depend on one single man. God's movement is greater than any personal ministry. As the years go by, people will forget the name River, because that's how it is. People don't remember the names of churches eternally. They're going to forget my name, but that's fine, because the glory belongs to God. People will forget River, they'll forget Dante, they'll forget the service, but they'll never forget how God changed their lives. What happened during this season. Maybe they'll forget the house of bread, but they'll never forget the bread that they ate. Every time they came here, there was bread in the house of bread. You might forget the bakery. It might not even be there anymore. What do I know? But you'll never forget what you ate. And in a culture in which instability is the norm, it's essential for people to find consistency in the church. Consistency. I always said we can't be jumping from one vision to another. The leaders at River know that this is the same vision that we've had for years. It hasn't changed. It's not that each weekend there's a new theology. Let's do something different. No, let's do. It's always the same thing. Some might get bored of it, but it's always a focus on what we're good at. We've spoken about it many times. Our commitment is that the sacred will never become common, and that will remain constant. And if you have a calling and right now you're in a moment of weakness, and you say, I know I have gifts and I'm not using them, I know I have a calling, but I've deviated. The only thing you have to do is say, my God, I recognize that I'm a disaster, that I have hiccups, and these hiccups take me from one place to another, and that I'm fighting against many things, but I give you my word that I want to die as a gladiator, as a samurai, fighting, always moving forward. I'm going to be like the palm trees in Florida that bend with the wind and the hurricanes, but when that wind passes, it gets up again. You can count on me until the last day of my life. That's the promise we have to give the Lord. We bend and we get back up. Yes or no? The Lord doesn't say to you, can you be perfect for the rest of your life? No, He will place that holiness. With His grace, He will give you that perfection. But what I'm saying to you, what I'm asking is, can you have that continuity? Can you invest your last breath in serving me? And if you have to end up in a hospital bed and you're still conscious because your mind has outlived your body, could you still preach to the person in the bed next to you before you go to eternity? Could you say to them, hey, I'm about to go, but what if you also prepare yourself to go with the Father? Could you serve me until your last breath? Yes or no? Look, I'm going to tell you an example that's completely opposite to the first three. David trying to build a temple, Agrippa, and Pilate's story. Paul's life. Paul's life is the antithesis of all this. Paul begins his testimony with these words. He says in Acts 22:3, he says, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus, but brought up in this city. I studied under Gamaliel. Again, we see this character. And I was thoroughly trained in the law of our ancestors. I was just as jealous for God as any of you are today. That's how he begins his testimony. And I want to give you this introduction so that you understand the point that I'm getting to. Tarsus, where Saul, later on Paul, was born, it was just a few kilometers away from the coast, and it served as a center of commerce for pirates, merchants from all over Europe and Asia. So any young boy that was raised on the coast of Tarsus was surrounded by dozens of languages and was a witness to a melting pot of cultures. Tarsus was a stop on the Roman routes, on the Roman roads. Follow me with this. The Roman Empire boasted about their roads. That's where the phrase comes from. All roads lead to Rome, when your husband gets lost, right? Well, the roads in Rome connected these commerce points from around the world. Ephesus, Iconium, Derbe, Tarsus. Tarsus was an academic center. It could be seen as nowadays maybe like where we might find the most important universities in the world. It was a rival to Alexandria and Athens. Saul learned the common language, Greek. So this guy spoke Greek. He wrote in Greek and he thought in Greek. Like some of you that speak Spanish but think in English. Your grammar is terrible. Not only did Saul speak the international tongue of the world, Greek, but he also had a dual passport. He had a dual citizenship, Jewish by birth, but also a Roman citizen by choice. Within the empire, he had all the privileges as any other Roman. He could go to any port and demand a judge, something that a Jew couldn't do. Jews were captives in one way or another. There was a de facto government, a dictatorship. Paul, in fact, could appeal to Caesar. He was treated as a free man. How did he acquire this right? Well, possibly. According to the word, it says that his father was a merchant of tents, and these were used often in military campaigns, and that's what Paul did for a living as well. Saul lived by his job. Maybe he accomplished this privilege because he had such a crucial role. These Roman soldiers were always nomads while trying to conquer the world. Paul leaves Tarsus with everything that a missionary might need. He had cultural knowledge. He dominated many languages. He had the documents to travel. He had a means of living. He wasn't a burden to anyone. He might have had savings. And he went to Jerusalem to study with the rabbis. He memorized the Torah. He learned all the laws of the rabbis. Paul was a great student, and later on they would write that in the practice of Judaism, here we find the Argentinian within him. He said, I was above all of my contemporaries because I had an exaggerated knowledge of all my forefathers. This is in Galatians. Now I want you to pay attention to this. This is where I'm getting to. Maybe Saul and Jesus crossed paths in Jerusalem. Saul persecuted the church, and the minimum age of belonging to this council of persecutors was 30. So we know Paul's approximate age, which implies that he was a contemporary to Jesus. And I've always asked myself, did they ever cross paths, Saul and Jesus? Not when Jesus encounters him on the road to Damascus. I'm talking about before. Think about a lost Jesus, 12 years old in the temple. And then a Saul, 12 or 13, who went to go study in the temple. Do you think Jesus ever fixed his eyes on this other boy, Saul, saying, he will be my future apostle? And this is the phrase that I want you to treasure. Before Saul followed God, God was already guiding Saul. Before he followed God, God was already guiding Saul. This blew my mind, because while Jesus was doing his task, God allowed Saul not to be there with the fishermen and the other guys. No, let him be educated. I want him to be educated. I want him to have the necessary documentation. I don't need this guy next to Peter and James. No, let him study. Who better prepared than a man who has studied the law for him to found the doctrines of the church? And God turned this killer of Christians into a champion of mercy. He wrote letters with the ink of his own heart. He learned Greek in the streets of Tarsus. He learned how to make tents. He studied the Torah at the feet of Gamaliel. He learned about mercy when Jesus encountered him. And as an older man, Paul would tell Timothy, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. He didn't say, I've almost finished the race. I was so close, my friend. No. I have finished the race. I have kept. He didn't say, I almost. He said, I have kept the faith. Now. There is never, we don't see an almost or a close. He says, now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Hallelujah! And here's the point. Jesus didn't abandon his walk to the cross, nor did Paul give up. And it's for one reason that I'll say again. Before Paul followed God, God was already following Paul, and this is for us today. Before you got to know the Lord, when you were out partying, when you were with all those women, when you were drinking and doing all that crazy stuff, whether you believe it or not, other pastors will hate me over this, but God was already taking care of you in a controlled environment because God was protecting you for a purpose. Does somebody believe it, yes or no? Well, what does this mean? The moments in which you wanted to give up, Jesus was there. The moments of temptation where you said, I gave in, I failed, Jesus was there. The moments where you were left on the side of the road saying, I can't, I don't have any oxygen, Jesus was there. It seems like a word of motivation, but it's a theological word. It's deep. Because if not, we'll think that the devil had us captive. God didn't know us, but God had a purpose for Saul before he was even born. Paul wasn't a plan B. It's not that Jesus said, oh, I found 12 ignorant men and one betrayed me. And none of these can write something worthy, so I'll have to look for someone else. Is there one? Yeah, there's one that persecutes Christians. No, God already knew that Saul existed as a child. He allowed his preparation. Paul was the only guy that could stand in the Greek pantheon and and speak in these men's language. Because there are men that have a call to reach the heart of other people, to reach their emotions, and I respect them. There are others that have a call to speak to intellect, because there are people that first learn here. Maybe there are many people like that say, no, don't come and shout at me, receive, 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 no! No, don't come at me with that. I want to understand. And there are people that say, the door to my heart is through here. Others, the door to their heart is in their emotions, and that's fine. We're all distinct. God respects our mental and spiritual and emotional structures. Paul would reach these thinkers, people with money, all the academics, those that debated with Socrates and Plato, those that spoke of philosophy. Peter couldn't go there. He couldn't go there saying, I don't have anything, but what I have, I give to you. No, I'm not discrediting, but that's not what they wanted to hear. They would have said, this is just a trick, this is magic. Paul knew how to speak to them because God had prepared him his whole life, and this is a message so that you don't give up. Because all those situations that you had to go through in your country, with a dysfunctional family, all those failures that you've had in life were permitted by God for a purpose. He never stopped guiding you. That's why you can't give up. You can't look back and say, I made a disaster. No, God allowed each detail. Athletes say that when they can no longer go on, they have to go beyond that wall of oxygen. I've said this before, and there are two options. You either stop there because your body says that's enough, or you look for a second wind. And that's where they begin to run with their hearts, and they no longer run with their legs. And this word goes for those that sometimes run out of strength, and the Lord has shown me that you're about to give up, and you think that maybe it's time to give up this race. The Lord has told me to tell you, there is no almost in your vocabulary nor mine. There is no almost. I called you to not abandon. We're either with Jesus or we're against him. There is no almost Christian. There are no almost called. There are no almost holy. There are no almost committed. With Jesus, almost become surely. The sometimes become always. The next time become this time, now. Jesus didn't go up on the cross to almost die for us. Jesus wasn't someone that almost rose. He gave it all. And Jesus had no space for almost, and he doesn't have room for that today. For the teacher, the word almost is like saying never. So my sister, my brother, if in this very moment you feel like you can't anymore, like you can't run anymore, please don't let it occur to you to sit down when you're so close to the finish line. Don't think that you'll say, well, God will know that I at least tried. I almost did it. The phrase, something is something, it doesn't work with God. No, something is nothing. You have to get to the finish line. However, dragging yourself there, bleeding on your elbows and knees, if you have no more strength and you have no oxygen, my beloved, forget about your legs, and from here on out, run with your heart. But run. Remain. Hang in there. Resist. Come on, we're going to give an applause to the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. Hallelujah. Someone has to applaud more than that if God has spoken. If you believe that God has spoken this morning, celebrate more than that. The King of Kings. Blessed are you. Are we ready to finish the race? Yes or no? How many are going to finish the race? How many? We're going to say a simple prayer. The prayer will be to commit to finishing the race. Good, bad, limping, bleeding, we're going to finish it. We have to cross the finish line. You have to know how to get there. A muleteer said, and we're going to get there. I'm supposed to be your pastor in this, your shepherd, and we won't leave anyone behind. Limping, dragging themselves, some will need a few kicks in the behind, but come on, let's go. We have to get to the finish line however we can. Nobody said we have to win. They told us we just have to get there. We have to get there and say, Lord, I've kept my faith. I've finished the race. As such, I have a crown waiting for me. Can we say that on our deathbed? When our eyes begin to close, when we get to the eve of our life, when we know that our strength is no longer the same, that we'll barely be able to see through our eyes, that day will come. The day will come for all of us. The day where we'll have to leave. And if Christ doesn't come beforehand, we'll get to know our old age, our last days, and we'll have to go. I spoke with Luis Palau, the beloved Luis Palau, a little bit before he passed away. Less than a year before he went to be with the Lord. And Luis would say, I've done everything possible within my foolishness, the little that I know how to do to please the Lord, the little that I know about His will. I just hope to have my reward because I've served Him from when I was a child. And I said to him, Luis, if you say that, what about me? You're a man that has moved millions. And he said, no, I just want to remain. And once I lose my senses, I just want to know that my last breath was for the Lord. It's worth it to waste yourself for the Lord. It's worth investing your life for the Lord. There's nothing that's worth more. There's no credit, no houses, no cars. It's just serving the Lord and saying, Lord, here goes my heart. I want to give my life, what's left of it. And may the Lord find you before you descend to the grave, saying, I've served, I've preached to my neighbors, I've been a good mom, good dad, I've worked to take your word to the nations, and if I can't go to the nations, I've given my offering, however small it may be, but it was part of my time, and that offering was destined to help someone out. If I can't give money, I've given my time, my energy, I've invited people out to a coffee, I've seen people cry at the market, I went up to them to give them a hug. That's serving the Lord. It's not necessarily going to heal lepers, but whatever it is God has asked of you. If we never see each other here again, and if life takes us down different paths, I would love to find you again in heaven. And that you say to me, I was part of River. I was there for that season. Or I visited River from a different country. Or I was there on that Sunday. You know, if life takes us down different paths, different callings, different roads, the important thing is to find ourselves again, soldier, at the end of the road. To see ourselves on the other side of the sun. And when we're in line to receive our reward, we say, it was worth it. It was worth the effort. It was worth all the work, sweat, blood, and tears, having to put up with poor characters, poor temperaments of those that would come to the congregation to mistreat us. It was worth the effort, beloved volunteer, usher, server, choir, those that help out in the bookstore, those working everywhere. It was worth it. Those that serve the coffee, those that sell the books, it was worth it. The welcome team, the young kids who almost get run over. It was worth it. It was worth it because when we get to the end of our days and we look through the rear view mirror of our lives, we won't see a bunch of chaotic days that nobody cares about, but we'll see a life which left a legacy, an imprint, so that others know that we were here. We'll leave a legacy so that people will know that we passed through this earth. They'll forget about us quickly right after we die. People forget about the soccer greats, great leaders. People will have a quick funeral and everybody else will continue on with their lives. That's how fragile we are. The Bible says that we're like a mist that appears in the morning and disappears a few hours later. So when we get buried, it'll be a quick funeral, and then even our children will continue with their lives, and it will be nothing more than just a portrait on the wall. Will be nothing more than just a memory. So all that we can leave here will be a fingerprint that will be erased sooner or later. But there will be a fingerprint being written in the heavens. It's like an engram. It's what you've done. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in the little things. I will place you above great things. Somebody has to celebrate God for that. Hallelujah. Do you believe it? Lift up your hands to heaven. Come on with me. Father, I've transmitted, I've said to your army, to your people, what I believe you told me to say. I haven't added, I haven't taken from what I believe to be your revelation. Here and around the world, wherever they're watching, listening to this message, across the 5 continents, wherever there are people listening in Spanish or English, Lord, I beg of you that these people cling to you until the last of their days. And even when they fall into grace, even when they stumble, with their knees scraped up, with their elbows bruised, I pray for them. For those that are lacking oxygen, those that have reached that wall, those that say, Lord, sometimes I don't even know how to pray. God says, a second wind is coming. A second oxygen is coming upon you, so that you can breathe in and take strength and courage, and you continue until the finish line. Don't give in. Don't give up. Don't get out of the ring. The bell has not sounded. Continue fighting another round. Don't give up, Mom. Don't give up, Dad. Son, don't give up. Beloved pastor, don't give up. Evangelist, colleague, missionaries, those that are in missions all around the world and have scarce resources, and you still haven't seen the fruits, and the multiplication that you've dreamt of hasn't arrived, and the race has become uphill, and you're seriously considering going back to your country. You say, I think I messed up. The Lord tells me to tell you, resist. He tells me to say,